can you hear me okay?
Yep, hear you great.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Maya.
Having a little bit of issue with this computer. I'm just going to try to stop them from being on both at the same time.
Starting to fall apart.
Hot mic, Dane.
Thanks, Matt.
Yes, please mute yourselves until you are, raise your virtual Zoom hand to give testimony. Okay, it is now 9 o'clock and I want to keep us on track. So I would like to call this meeting to order. Can we please start with roll call?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Chair Allegado.
Present.
Vice Chair Keener.
Present.
Commissioner Islam.
Present.
Commissioner Otsuka.
Present.
And Commissioner Murumai.
Present.
Chair, you have quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from January 26th, 2024, which you have received. And so I'll ask if the commissioners have any corrections to the minutes. Brad, I note that you were absent, so I'll just skip you unless you have anything to comment on. Vice Chair Keener?
Nope, they look good. No corrections.
Okay. Commissioner Otsuka?
No correction.
Commissioner Islam?
They look good. Thank you, Chair.
Great. All right. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes of the Climate Change Commission meetings from January 2024?
Motion to adopt the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Oh, I second.
Okay. Please raise your hands to show if you want to adopt by ayes. Okay. I note that we have 4 ayes. Any nays? No nays. And any abstentions? Okay. Commissioner Romain.
Sure. Yes, I think I abstained since I was not present.
Great. Thank you. So we will adopt the minutes from the last meeting. Okay, moving right along. The next item on our agenda today is a report on the activities of the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resilience. Would that be you, Director Gonzar?
Yes, aloha, good morning. Thank you very much, Chair and Commissioners. Happy to be with you here today. Matt Gonzar, Executive Director for the Mayor's Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency. And this is an update on not everything, but some real highlights since the last meeting of January the 26th. It's always nice to start off with that we were able to welcome a new team member. Jason Sean joined us on February 2nd as the new Food Security and Sustainability Program Manager. This is a position that had been really critical through the onset of COVID-19 pandemic, but we now are excited to have this new capacity to think about what is really the city's role in this topic of food security and sustainability. And Jason has been tremendous in helping us really think through the definitions of what these might mean, the different metrics, understanding what the city's opportunities to leverage support, and not obviously being able to tackle all of it, but really making sure that we're prioritizing why the city is a player and a partner in this work moving forward. We also work closely with the Office of Economic Revitalization. They similarly are going through transitions in their quote unquote food team. So it may be of interest in the future if we could come back to share out a little bit more about where we're at and where we think we could go and see if that might be an opportunity that's ripe for more thoughts or support from the Climate Change Commission. I also note that OER similarly has an assigned commission, the Commission on Economic Revitalization. They have a slightly different obligation, really actually talking about a work plan for the office and updating that work plan on a cycle of about 5 years. So I think there's a lot of good overlap and synergy between the two offices and how to really elevate this work moving forward. Other things that we're excited about, even just tomorrow, looking forward to being out and about in community. We'll have some team members at the Kalo Fest Eki Project in Kaholu, team members out at the Prince Kuhio Festival in Nanakuli, talking about an exciting Solarize 808 community-based program to help bring clean, renewable energy sovereignty to people and see how we can continue to hui up towards bringing those benefits to community members. And stepping into Earth Month in April, we look forward to participating in a whole variety of other activities, as well as some city-led activities, which we'll make sure to advertise through all of our social media and newsletter efforts. On the broader scale, a little bit outside of just our office, starting last night, we kicked off the 2024 series of mayor town halls. These are currently scheduled 11 Thursdays now, starting just last night through early June, though there might be the potential for a couple of more. If you had not had a chance to observe or participate in any of them last year, it's a tremendous, as Mayor says, journey of learning to really just hear as many questions as possible and then provide immediate answers in the moment, but also to collect more information to follow up with community members and individuals after the fact. So we were at Kapolei High School last night. Next week, the town hall will be in, I'm forgetting, Kailua Intermediate School, and then you can see the rest of the schedule online at the mayor's homepage. There we go, thank you. Right now, it's also budget season at the city and county of Honolulu. My office and the departments had a series of budget briefings the week of March 11th. We just received potential changes from City Council. I'm excited to say that it looks like we have good support and partnerships with the City Council members and currently have no proposed cuts, which is always a good place to start from. And then lastly, in recognition of the Commission's great work, I'm pleased to say we were finally able to take the next step to transmit 2 of your most recent guidance documents that were transmitted to the mayor, the departments, and City Council just this month. That includes the urban heat guidance document and the updated climate change and social equity document, which also includes your equity pledge. Just to wrap up, highlighting a few projects and programs. Very excited that just last month, at the end of last month, City Council adopted Resolution 24-16, which formally establishes the city's first ever climate adaptation strategy, Climate Ready Oahu. And we've given past presentations with the Commission. We greatly benefited from the foundational information that the Commission has been able to provide the past many years, as well as your contributions throughout the whole of the process. If that's of interest, we could talk with the team, and certainly we could come back to provide an update perhaps in a couple of months in terms of what are the priority next steps and the efforts that we're really trying to bring forth, working with community, but also driving implementation with the city departments. So that was adopted on the 28th, and we were bullish in anticipating its adoption and swiftly then celebrated the next day out at Makalapa Neighborhood Park near the Halava Rail Station and Aloha Stadium. And this is a great moment to really kickstart broader park improvements that were further implemented just this week during spring break with Keiki, really recognizing both the hands-on opportunity for people to support us in planting trees in public spaces, and then also in helping us malama that area moving forward. Another project that we're excited just launched on March 7th, the Kolau Poko Resilience Review. This is a partnership with the University of Hawaii Climate Resilience Collaborative, and it's supported by a grant from the Department of Defense Office of Local Defense Community cooperation. It's a really unique funding opportunity that allows DoD monies to look both inside and outside the quote unquote fence lines of military installations. Not only are we interested in really bringing new cutting edge science to a different part of the island, but also potentially developing a replicable method and a model for how we could do this work moving forward that then helps inform community plans, helps inform our city functional agencies and their infrastructure plans, and happy to share more information perhaps at a later date once we get some of the committee work underway. And I do want to acknowledge and recognize that it is a direct partnership with Marine Corps Base Hawaii. You know, they needed to provide support in our application, and they were great partners in hosting us out at Mokapu earlier this month. You've probably heard that we are in the throes of updating the city's 5-year climate action plan. Hopefully in the coming months, you'll have an opportunity to see both a request for proposals that's out there for technical support, but also something that we're super excited about, a unique notice of funding availability so that we can work directly with place-based community organizations to help support them in supporting us in connecting with community members and really making it a reciprocal process in terms of both the resources and funding to do community engagement, but also the exchange and respect on the information towards how to make the next update even better and more relevant for people's lives today. And we do appreciate again and acknowledge the Commission's updated climate change and social equity guidance, which we are really trying to carry forward and think about how we practice the different components of equity in the work that we do. And then lastly, I want to hopefully get all of your participation in the Oahu Flood Risk Survey. This is an effort funded and supported by FEMA directly, and it's helping us to better understand people's baseline awareness or comprehension of flood risks around the island and in their communities, any experiences they may have had in flooding events, and then their understanding on ways to mitigate flood risk moving forward, particularly including discussions around flood insurance. So this is still open now through April 1st, and it is available at resilientoahu.org/getfloodready. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Mahalo. So thank you for everybody joining us today. Just as a reminder of how we run this meeting, I'm going to be taking questions and comments from commissioners first, and then we'll open it up to comments and testimony from the public for each agenda item. So I'd like to start by inviting, and of course, just as Commissioner Otsuka has demonstrated, it's most helpful if you can raise your virtual hand so that I can recognize you. So we'll start with Commissioner Otsuka.
Hi, Matt. As usual, great work from your office. So thanks for all of the updates. I wanted to know, based on the sort of mayoral meetings that you've been attending thus far, if there's been any topics that you've been pretty consistently hearing about climate change, sustainability, and or resiliency that you think the Commission should consider moving forward when we consider our guidance documents? Is there anything that we should be aware of?
Yeah, I would admittedly need to think back on last year. So again, we just kicked off number 1 of currently 11 scheduled events for this calendar year, just last night. It is different in different communities, and the different meetings have different topics of interest. But yes, we could certainly try to compile that to then come back and share any insights. There are some major themes that were recurring in all of the meetings, a lot around, communities' interest in play and recreation and the equitable resources to support that work. There's a strong contingent that is interested in a new racetrack here on Oahu. There had been a racetrack decades ago that ultimately closed, I believe, around 2006. So again, that's grown-up play and recreation as well. And then there's a lot of other topical areas around permitting, which we know is a critical priority for the mayor and the administration too. But that's a good suggestion. Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Romine?
Thanks for those updates, Matt, and congratulations to you and the CSR team on the passage of the Climate Ready Oahu climate adaptation strategy. It's great to see that happen. Though I know you all have been hard at work on those strategies and actions in there for some time. It would be great, as I think you offered, to get an update at a meeting sometime soon if you are willing to just know where we stand on those different strategies. And I think that would be one helpful venue for us all to kind of reassess and discuss where the commission can help, and continue to provide information on maybe some of the strategies that haven't been addressed as thoroughly as some of the others. So again, thank you and congrats.
Great.
Thank you, Matt. Vice Chair Keener.
Thank you, Director Gonser. Great work, and that was a big list of updates. A lot of exciting stuff in there. I had a couple questions, but maybe the first one, I was interested in the Defense Community Cooperation Awards. I hadn't heard of that before. That's really interesting, and I pulled it up and was just kind of scrolling through right now. So can you tell me if those awards, so you mentioned it was with MCBH, are those supporting communities on base or like in close proximity, or sorry if I missed that, like what is the community link and what is the community? Thanks.
Yeah, so it's actually an award and a grant to the city. And though she's not on the call and now actually works at NAVFAC, I want to acknowledge a former Marine Corps Base Hawaii employee, Megan Ostrom, who had been consistently keeping us aware of the opportunity almost on an annual basis. And we really realized a path forward in working with UH in this most recent round. It is intended to support communities that have installations in them. We obviously have many installations here on Oahu. So again, it might be an opportunity moving forward to do more of this kind of direct partnership work, but it's not just meant to focus within the quote unquote fence line. It's really about that installation is only as secure and resilient as we as a community are strong, thriving, and healthy, right? A lot of service members and or civilian personnel live and then commute and get to base. And it's all about the infrastructure that both supports the community and the installation in this instance. So it's a great resource for us to really look at some risk and climate data and some of the infrastructure vulnerabilities that perhaps we might not have thought to really coalesce around this Ko'olaupo'ko resilience region. So that was our pitch. We were empowered to define what the region was for us. We know that that is consistent also with how the city does the Sustainable Communities Plan. I know sometimes there's discrepancy or differences in some of the MOKU maps. I just want to be clear that in some MOKU maps, Ko'olaupo'ko also includes a portion of what we now call Hawaii Kai, but the boundary that we're looking at really is what today we know as Kualoa Regional Park to Makapu'u Point.
Thanks, that's helpful. And sorry if I missed this too, or if I am misunderstanding their programs. Looking at looking online, it has the different types of programs of assistance that includes community noise mitigation, mission realignment, installation resilience. Did you have to apply for one or several of those, or did you just kind of broadly apply?
No, so technically this falls within the installation resilience review, but that's not how we call it. And that's actually, DoD doesn't obligate it to, because it somewhat misrepresents the opportunity and the work. When you just say installation, you think just within the boundaries of the base, but it's really about a community relationship and the strength of the region.
Okay, very interesting. I'll be interested to hear more about that as it develops.
Thanks, Commissioner Keener. Commissioner Islam, any questions from you?
Yeah, thanks, Matt, for the update, and congrats on getting Oahu Ready adopted. I wanted to know how, and also congrats on sort of introducing or kind of publish urban heat and social equity papers to the mayor and the council. I wanted to sort of understand, because the Climate Ready really kind of talks about a lot of these strategies, right? Urban heat is one of sort of the near-term things that we need to address. Is there anything that the commission can do to help to sort of support what we discussed in our guidance paper to sort of move maybe some of those action steps forward?
Yeah, that's always and you all are always thinking about, how to make sure that the guidance documents land, right? And that there's actual use of them. And we've seen the success with past ones like sea level rise and the shoreline setback guidance documents. We have a couple of heat related projects that perhaps either standalone or what Commissioner Romine had asked about, an opportunity to update generally on the whole of the strategy. I think it's a great reminder that the commission itself also can convene and ask people, whether it's city departments or other agencies or community leaders, to come share and learn and hear. And then perhaps that could be also an opportunity to remind of some of the specific science in the data, some of the specific recommendations. Full disclosure, we benefited from, the drafts and the process that you all went through. And a lot of that, even though it hadn't yet been adopted, immediately helped inform and tighten up some of the proposals and strategies and actions that we're hearing from community members and agencies as well. So it's a good first step, but it's a good reminder of like, yes, the delivery of the guidance is really the first step towards actual realizing the benefits of taking the actions.
Great, thanks for reminding us. I do have a follow-up question, but it's mainly to Chair Aligato. Have we had any precedents in the past of convening to kind of really maybe further inform council or departments about particular topics in our guidance paper?
I believe commission hasn't directly, but OCCSR definitely does.
Okay.
Yeah, and Director Gonzer can comment on that, but I know that office regularly meets with other city departments to like help them have the most updated information and to kind of provide the advice that we have given on a more granular level. But Director Gonzer can comment on that more.
Yeah, I'd say that the commission's good practice to date has been in the prep and development of what might the guidance documents need. You all have in the past invited to hear from agencies, where they are at and where we are thinking as a city. And that's a practice that I would like to see continue moving forward as well. And we can always be a partner in helping set those up.
Yes, for example, in the past, I believe we've met with HART when it was called something else. And I believe that we've also met with Office of Environmental Services, the sewage people, I believe, they've all been guests here at the Climate Change Commission. So yeah, Commissioner Islam, if you feel that it's good for specific departments to join us, we can certainly put the invite out to them. Yeah.
Okay, great. Good to know. I'm just sort of top of mind, the urban heat as it really relates to our built environment is really pressing and things that we're kind of talking about, at least in the private sector, right? And so I just want to make sure that it doesn't get missed, because this is sort of definitely the opportunity to sort of capture it and sort of implement it. So I'll think of some ideas, maybe share them out at some upcoming meeting, but I just want to sort of understand what precedents we had before and sort of our opportunities for convening. So.
Yeah, and a little bit outside of meetings, Commissioner Islam, certainly if there's like a, hey, CCSR, could you join me as both a designer and commissioner, and perhaps we collectively engage, say, AIA Honolulu, or thinking through those other ways to extend information.
Of course, yeah, that's what I'm sort of thinking about. So yeah, I think it's great. I'll put my thinking cap on further and get back to you all. So thanks so much, Matt.
Commissioner Otsuka, comments?
Yeah, really quick, Melanie, I just want to also mention that I had asked Chair Legato if we could invite DPP a couple months ago to our meeting. So they were looking for comments on their primary urban center plan. And so I had mentioned or had asked Melanie if we could, or sorry, Rosie, if we could invite them. And they came and presented, and then we offered comments. So I think, especially if there's a plan that's upcoming that they're looking for comments on, or if we just want an update on sort of any sort of city process, I think that would be really helpful. I think that I don't know about you, Rosie. I thought it was really helpful to hear from them directly and then sort of converse and have a discussion.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for that reminder, Kiana. Chair Keener, Vice Chair Keener.
Yeah, just on that, I was going to save this until the announcements, but it actually folds into Melanie, your comment. And just one way that, and this isn't city specific, it's state specific, but next week we are holding the, let me put it in the chat, the climate conference, Hawaii State Climate Conference, and during Climate Week next week, there are a bunch of interesting events, but one of them, so on Wednesday morning, we're kicking off the day with a discussion of National Climate Assessment Chapter findings, but then in the afternoon, that's leading into the State Climate Commission's kickoff of the Comprehensive Climate Plan. And that's really going to be a chance for people to comment and talk about implementation in different sectors. So looking for opportunities, putting out interest and noting gaps and working with community and people from the county and state who are going to be there to really talk about opportunities, and heat guidance would definitely be significant as a part of that discussion. So I encourage you to sign up, register. It's kind of annoying on the site. You have to register for each event separately. And there are reasons we had to do that, but so just make sure that you're registering for the right thing, but we encourage people to show up and talk about climate adaptation implementation.
Mahalo. And we'll ask you to pump that up one more time when we get to the announcements for the public's agenda item. Okay, I have a couple of questions myself for OCCSR. The first is I'm very excited about the series of town halls, and I'm going to try and attend one when it comes to my area. And I was wondering if we could, I mean, if OCCSR is attending these meetings, if we could maybe get a summation of what are the issues most salient and related to climate change that have been brought up during these town halls. I also note that, and I can't remember if it was in the newspaper or somewhere else, that one of the things that Mayor had said he wanted to work on was, and salient, it's relevant to today's conversation, is to work on relationships with the military. And I was wondering if we could kind of flag those, because as you can see from where we're going with the commission, one of the next briefs that is in development is the interface of the United States military and its impact on climate resilience as well as vulnerability for the city and county of Honolulu. So I'd like to understand more what Mayor is thinking as far as those relationships, and and also what the U.S. military's responsibilities are going to be to the people of Hawaii with regard to assisting and supporting our climate resilience. So that was just a comment. My question though is,
May I add in on that?
Yes,
just
absolutely.
For everyone, all of the town halls are live on Olelo, prime time, dinner eating time every Thursday night for the next, there is one by week, May the 9th, but it's every week now, again, starting yesterday through early June. And certainly one of the best ways to ensure that that is the kind of question that is received and or responded to in the moment is to attend a meeting and ask the question explicitly.
Mahalo. And of course, really, really want to applaud OCCSR for all the great work that you are doing. And I think I'm going to see you at the Kalo Fest at Key Project on Saturday, tomorrow. I have a couple questions about the installation resilience review. I was wondering if there are other areas that potentially these monies could be directed towards, because you said, my understanding was that this is a grant, or these are monies that are available on a semi-regular basis. And so while this is directed at Ko'olau Poko at this moment, is my understanding. Would it be possible to utilize these monies to look at to have an installation resilience review for other parts of Oahu? Do you know that information, Matt?
Yes, we could explore that. Typically, it's about proximity within an installation, and again, we have several on island, so that could benefit those areas or those regions as to be defined in the partnership and the support for pursuing the funding opportunity. This process is it's short. It's only about a year. It's primarily about new data generation, climate forecasting, and the impacts of those on existing systems, both human, cultural, natural, and physical, infrastructure systems, and then what might potential solutions be to address the intersection of those risks and today's systems. It's interesting because it is a thing that will come to us. It is a product of Marine Corps Base Hawaii as well, but it's not limited in how we are approaching it to just what can or should the city do, what can or must the state do, what can or must the Department of Defense do. We're really trying, since we've never done this before, and it's a unique opportunity, we want to be open to what it might be able to inform.
Great, thanks. And so from that was kind of one of my follow-up questions, was to kind of get an understanding of what kind of data was being generated, what kind of risks. Was it just sea level rise, or if it covered everything like fire risk and clean water and things like that?
Certainly more of the direct physical climate impacts and risks. I would have to check with the team in terms of clean water obviously can mean different things, right? It's nearshore water quality with some of the wastewater challenges. It's perhaps, other impacts to drinking and groundwater as a result of what happens above, below land. And we're refining what can be accomplished through the means that we have and the team that's doing some of the data production.
And is the intended outcomes of this report from, I guess, as you said, it's going to be coming from Kaneohe, the Marine Corps Hawaii. Is it specifically for what the city can do, or are there commitments on the installation side also that will come up from that?
So we, the city, will be the recipient of the report, but obviously it's a public thing and it's available for everyone. I think it's a little bit still to be determined how it might play out in terms of the prioritized actions or solutions. And then obviously you'd need to identify who's most appropriate to make any particular move to implement a thing. We know that we service drinking water to the base. It's actually, I think, the only installation that the Board of Water Supply provides drinking water to. The base itself is they just got a big appropriation for improved wastewater recycling and water reuse on base, which is an important conservation measure and shows the partnerships there as well. We know all the drainage networks, the transportation networks, but also better learning about some of the more emergent stewardship cooperations, right? The partnership between the folks in Heia now working on some of the wetland restoration out at the isthmus and the peninsula there. So I think it's also going to be informed by both a community steering committee and then a community technical committee. And those, we again just had the collective launch 2 weeks ago, and we haven't yet taken the next steps on the series of workshops moving forward.
Thank you. And then one last question before we go to public comment and question is on the Oahu flood risk survey. I'm very excited that it's funded by FEMA to provide baseline awareness. And is there a sense that FEMA will provide funding to provide assessment for other kinds of risks in the future?
TBD, this is a particular program called the Cooperating Technical Partnership within FEMA, which is squarely and solely about flood risk. So that is why it obviously has an emphasis. We know FEMA has a broader interest and responsibility around preparedness for many kinds of hazards, but this CTP program is specifically around all things flood.
Mahalo. At this time, we're going to open it up for this particular agenda item. If the public would like to have any comments or testimony or questions for OCCSR and direct them to Director Gonzer. If you would like to, please raise your virtual Zoom hand so that I can line up people to ask. And I will put myself on mute and see if there are any questions from the public. Maya, any questions from Facebook? Okay. So thank you so much, Director Gonzer. As always, we're really, really proud of all the work that OCCSR does, and we look forward to hearing more and potentially inviting follow-ups on many of these items. At this time, we're going to move on to our next agenda item. We're going to be having a presentation on U.S. military installation efforts on climate risks in Hawaii and the Pacific by Mr. Joseph Martin. He is the director for the Center for Excellence in Disaster Management and Humanitarian Assistance and director for Indo-PACOM Climate Change Impact Program.
All right, well, thank you very much. I trust that you can hear and see me. In a moment, I'm going to share the screen with some slides. But before I do that, I want to sort of emphasize that I consider this to be sort of the start of a conversation. So it's terrific to meet some new folks. It's great to see Victoria and Brad again. Have been working in the climate space here at Indo-PACOM for about 2.5 years. And again, this is sort of the start to this. By no means are I think is anybody anywhere near done looking at this problem set. What my goal is really to inform the team. So in listening to what the commission has been briefed on before, seeing different topics, and really to let you know how Indo-Pacific Command is looking at this. I hope not to disappoint you in providing not so much a service view from the service component, so the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, Marines, but really from looking at it from a security perspective. So it's a different type of lens that we look at this, but it really, I do consider this to be sort of a launch point for future engagements. To be clear, we are not climate scientists. I'm a retired Air Force logistics officer. I'll talk a little bit more about the center in a second, but we really do rely on the same analysis and data that others do to uncover these climate impacts. I will end this with some analytics and a few case studies on the international front to give you an idea of sort of the things that we do. And in typical form and fashion, as I start to share the screen, be forewarned that this is a traditional Department of Defense briefing. So there are 26 slides, and I think I only have 15 minutes. So we'll see how this goes. I'll stop at any point. I'm looking at 2 different screens. So if you have a raise your hand or something, just let me know. But really, here's the sort of go part on this. So we are a Department of Defense organization. You can see in the center section there. I report directly to Admiral Aquilino as my supervisor and then up to the Secretary of Defense. We do have a unique mission in that we operate as a center globally in nature, both on the humanitarian assistance side, which we've been doing this is our 30th year performing that function, and then also partner with a tremendous number of organizations globally. And you can see we have relationships with the international community, the Red Cross, the UN, all kinds of different academic partnerships. As a matter of fact, I think we do probably close to 8 or 10 research projects per year just with the University of Hawaii. Our missions really across the top. So we do training, engagement, security cooperation, a bunch of research work. And then really the most recent level of effort is the Adaptation and Resilience Office here at the center. And that's the primary focus for the discussion today. But why does Indo-PACOM care so much about this? And this is just a quick history. And we actually wrote an entire book on it, which you can see on the right, that talks about the number of times and locations in which Indo-Pacific Command has provided humanitarian assistance and disaster response across the Pacific. It's pretty much something going on just about every year. This is not an assigned mission to the military, but it is something that the military gets involved in a lot. There are disaster response responsibilities, as you're probably aware, to the state of Hawaii, as well as the other territories and protectorates. That's primarily done through the Defense Support to Civilian Agencies, or DSCA. The Army has lead for that here in Hawaii and in Guam. And then these efforts that you see here are run through USAID and the military for international humanitarian assistance, which really is the focus of what we do at the center. When I was provided the opportunity to add climate impacts to the CFE mission, Admiral Aquilino was very clear. He said he wanted us to look at the military impacts and not to, as he described it, sort of change the axis of the Earth. So I'm going to walk very quickly through sort of the way that we look at this, and then through the slide presentation, you'll see these color codes at the top of a few of the slides as well to kind of move you along. I'm not here to argue with, nor would I ever, with anybody on the climate science. I think that the data is indisputable as far as the changes that are occurring. And then on the environmental impacts, what do those changes lead to? These changes are obviously global in nature, affect everybody differently in different locations, up to and including Hawaii, the territories, protectorates, and all the different locations and nations within the Pacific. But really, once you start having people living in those spaces, there's this human security impacts in the blue box in the center. Those can, because most people live in some version of a state, impact actually the state security. So think through places like Kiribati or Vanuatu or even the Maldives, and what happens when the impacts of sea level rise, for example, start to impact food security and the rest of this. What happens to the governments themselves? What happens to the change in fishing patterns for exclusive economic zones and the environment and the income for some of these, particularly the Pacific Island nations in the Blue Continent? And really what my emphasis in this program, and hopefully the information, the new information that maybe you'll get today, is looking at what are the military impacts. There's some specific examples I'll show you at the tail end of the presentation related to Hawaii and other places. Really, what happens when we have to, as a military, start responding more to disasters? What happens to the readiness of those forces? What happens to training location losses? The best example I can give you there is a permafrost melt in Alaska and the training for the 11th Airborne Division, the ability to operate up there. What about those places forward in the Philippines and Palau and other places in which we operate and exercise? What happens to those locations as the impact of sea level rise or other climate risks start to affect them? So this is kind of the way that we think about it. I'm hoping that that's useful, but I'll give you sort of the context of how we effectively sort of teach this and work with partners. One is just showing sort of the same data that everybody else does, which is, what is going on within the different data scenarios? What is going on with respect to the change in temperature? I was asked a question the other day, and I will encourage people to correct me. Why is 2050 such a big deal? And I will give you the answer that I would provide to this general officer who asked me, which is two things. One is the data up until 2050, at least according to this chart, it really doesn't diverge very much. So it doesn't really matter too much in thinking of it in the different scenarios, right? This is progressively going to get worse, right? So, and you can think through any of the different scenarios. It doesn't matter. The fact is up to about 2050, they really don't diverge until after that. Similarly, for military construction projects and most big construction projects, there's about a 25-year planning horizon for the impact of these things. So that 2050 has a particular meaning to the Department of Defense in both understanding projections as well as understanding sort of the infrastructure work that they would want to do. But what does it do to people? And this goes to a conversation that was already started talking about urban heat. And I'd love to follow up with somebody on that later, because as we look at projections for extreme heat days, what happens if you look for Northern Australia, for example, to those places in which the U.S. Marines are currently training? What happens in the city of Bangkok, in which both extreme heat and sea level rise are going to make living there very difficult? So this is the same data that is provided through IPCC, but put into a software program called Disaster Aware, which is run by the Pacific Disaster Center over on Maui. And basically, they added GIS layers to their existing tool to show the impact of climate change. And this particular data and some other data sets can be zoomed in to the national level, regional level, in some cases all the way down to about 30 meters of resolution for sea level rise globally. Talking now sort of through those environmental impacts. So this is a picture of flooding in Texas, but it could literally be any place in the Pacific. Think through Southeast Asia and places like Vietnam or Bangladesh or others. I mean, this is a big issue with respect to livability, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second as well. Very familiar with the sea level rise threats across the theater, as well as the components that make it up. But in some places, and you'll see some images in a second, I mean, that's going to have a catastrophic effect on livability, as well as the economic impacts and others in different places, up to and including likely many, many locations here in Hawaii. But what did this lead to? Again, I mentioned when you start putting people into this and you start worrying about saltwater inundation or sea level rise or loss of freshwater access, what happens to that? I mean, a simple picture like this tells a huge story in a place that probably already has significant economic challenges. What happens when water now adds to that, and what level of insecurity does that generate? Similarly, and this is a chart just of sort of the climate niche spaces in which humans can live fairly easily. I don't have the 2070 picture built into the slide, but there becomes portions of the world that effectively become unlivable by 2070. Central Africa, for example, just becomes just unbearable. But other places, interesting, like North America and even Europe, you actually start to grow as the heat changes and people will be able to move into places that they couldn't live before, which is kind of an interesting dynamic. Obviously, all of these things can affect health and disease, and you can see the different factors tied there. So the impact of climate change on human health is a big deal. That is particularly relevant as we look into the Indo-Pacific region for places that are already at high risk for health risks and hazards. What happens when you start changing the disease-borne vector spread due to propensity for water in places that didn't used to have it? What do you do in a country that gets dengue, Lyme, malaria, or others that already has a bad medical system, and now you're introducing new issues to it? And infrastructure and utilities. You can clearly see an effect of flooding. Extreme heat is going to generate power drains and the necessity to cool or provide additional fresh water that some places simply don't have. But all of these these human impact factors here are really to drive out the point that it's not just that it's getting warmer. It's what are the impacts of that? And then in certain places, you can see sort of the disaster response increases that are going to occur. Now, we try to use the term smartly that says, hey, these are extreme weather events, right? And they're driven by a changing climate, for example, in some cases. But the fact is, most of these disasters have been occurring in most of these places for a very, very long time. The question becomes, will the increase in intensity be matched by their increase in resilience as places up to including Hawaii become more resilient to the impact of disasters, and yet the increased threat of it could be higher than that. And then there's a big deal perhaps here, but more so in many places across the region in which climate is going to cause displacement and migration. And that can generate its own risks as far as security is concerned. Many of the Pacific Island nations, as they lose some of their atoll living communities, are going to have to put the folks somewhere, and based on sort of the cultural patterns, the ownership of land, tribal relationships, et cetera, those can generate some significant issues on a governance side. And then this really has taken it. This is just one of the military impact slides that talks to, hey, what is going on with respect to the military responses to climate hazards? And this is, again, looking at, sort of flooding, wildfires, hurricanes, droughts, the rest of this. What is driving that increased need for disaster response from a military perspective? Because that does directly affect the readiness of military forces. I'm going to go in now to a couple of examples. I'm going to try to, I'd say, speed it up, but I think I'm going pretty fast anyway. But I want to make sure that you know that I will reiterate that I'm absolutely here for any questions afterwards. And my contact data is on the very last slide when we get to it. So let's look locally. And I show this slide a lot, this slide, the next one, to people around the region, so they understand that the impacts of climate change are directly affecting another island nation called Hawaii. The things that they're experiencing in some of these Pacific Island nations in particular are exactly what we're experiencing here. And Brad, I think I either stole the slide from you or from Chip, but this is the sea level rise projection for the Marine Corps base out in Kaneohe Bay. What happens to that combat capability that is there for national security defense when you can no longer access it? Predictions like this are very meaningful both for U.S. military planning, and the Marines are fully aware of the threats and hazards from sea level rise at that location, and probably all locations in the Pacific. But maybe some of the other countries and places out there really aren't. Similarly, I show this slide because there are an awful lot of reef runways and low elevation power plants, et cetera, across the region. So it's not just to point out that many of the countries, friends, allies, and partners that we have are at risk, but we are as well. And some of the adaptation things that we've talked about maybe can be leveraged and shared with friends, allies, and partners so that they don't have to go through the same learning curve or can gain from the experience that we have here in Hawaii. I actually brought the tool I mentioned earlier, DisasterAware, to Pohnpei. So this is actually the island of Pohnpei. And then Colonia, the city, is sort of to the bottom part of this picture, and the airport's up north, or to the top part of the picture. And what it shows is the impact of sea level rise at 2050 on the connecting road, as well as most of the industrial complex areas within Pohnpei itself. That's a huge deal for them because as an island and an atoll, atoll-intensive country, what do you do when you have these issues out to 2050? These are when I start talking about sea level rise in places like that, it kind of shocks them in the ability to visualize it in a reasonable time horizon. The tool itself actually allows you to look very specifically at other things. So, for example, this is an airport in Papua New Guinea that is both from an international perspective as well as a military implications perspective. And you can actually look at each location based on the climate threats that you can see here on the right, and then the effect of climate on the airfield itself. The tool, and this isn't a sales plug necessarily for DisasterAware, there's about 6,000 layers of data underneath it, which can then give you population data for affected spaces as well as key infrastructure, which you see here. We've also done a national level analysis, which has been provided to every U.S. ambassador, as well as the chiefs of all the military forces in the Pacific. It looks across 5 different threats. So consecutive dry days is an indicator of drought, extreme heat, precipitation, cyclones, and sea level rise, with graphics that you can sort of see on the left-hand side here that can scroll down, as I mentioned earlier, to a very high level of detail. The tool also then allows you to figure out, for example, in the center, extreme heat, how many different airports are going to be affected by extreme heat conditions, because that affects the ability of aircraft to fly. So once it gets too hot, literally the aerodynamics over the wing of an airplane reduce the amount that actually lift off the ground, which has a big impact for military forces, but also for commercial airline flyability. These reports are out there and available on our website for free for 46 different locations across the country, as well as all the other reports. So just real quickly, how does this affect others? And you think through the security implications. 80% of the people involved in the Mekong Delta region rely on rice production for their livelihoods. What happens with upstream damming, sea level rise, saltwater inundation, et cetera, when those people no longer have access to that? That's a huge economic impact. If you think about, say, 14 or 15 million people who are now frustrated with their government, or perhaps the government above them, or the governments that are driving some of this, what do you do about that? This becomes, and this is sort of not the only focus area, but a big issue for us, is where are the places in which conflict could generate based on the impact of climate change? And that's kind of a big deal when your boss's responsibility is national security for the Indo-Pacific region. Similarly, sea level rise in Bangladesh is going to be a mess. They're going to lose anywhere from 10 to 15% of their land mass in total and displace probably 17 to 20 million people. Where do you go when you're already sort of one of the most destitute and disaster-prone countries in the world? These are the things that we are trying to look at from a security implication perspective, because they have to go someplace. And in the case of Bangladesh, they're surrounded on 3 sides by India and 1 by Myanmar. And the Indians basically already built the fence most of the way around. So it's kind of a security implication challenge. And then as we start thinking about extreme heat, what happens in places like happened last year and the year before with extreme heat in places like India and Pakistan, which don't have the resources necessary to cool or to provide fresh water to do some of those things, as well as the economic impact tied to loss of food production, the ability to import or export wheat, with a population in India, for example, of 1.4 billion people. So I know that these aren't specifically, and I think that's probably my last slide. Yeah, these are not specifically Hawaii related things, but it is very easy to draw a parallel between extreme heat or urban heat issues in a place like Bangkok, which has very low adaptive capacity. And my extreme interest in now figuring out how is Hawaii looking at this, because that provides the ability to leverage that information to them. So I'm going to pause there for what is hopefully an hour or two at the most of questions, and then we'll see how this proceeds. But I'm going to leave this up. My contact information is there. I'll also post it in the chat section for anybody who wants to get a hold of me. So I will stop sharing now so that we can see everybody's smiling faces. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. I'm good. So I just wanted to kind of confirm and reiterate, and thank you for sharing the efforts that the Department of Defense has in the Indo-Pacific theater. And I guess one of my key questions is, and maybe you can lead us to someone who we have to invite next time, is this is a very outward-facing approach. Do you know who, or if it does exist, someone who's really looking at, you know, who is doing the inward stuff of looking at the U.S. installations located domestically and what are the climate risks to those internal locations? Because that, the purview of the Climate Change Commission is really the climate risks to the city and county of Honolulu, which is the island of Oahu. And so we'd really like to understand who is looking at that.
Sure. So the short answer is there probably across the Department of Defense hundreds, if not thousands, of people. Within the state of Hawaii, I can try and hunt down sort of the specific names for installations here, but the Navy region folks for certain, the Army Corps of Engineers as they manage all their facilities, and then of course the Air Force folks for the Air Force installations here. Every one of them, and I can say this unequivocally, looks at every project that they do with respect to the impact of climate change on, say, an adaptation project, right, or a construction project. They are also all, from what I have been hearing, very interested in the outside the fence line kind of conversations and finding the right groups within Oahu and the other islands to figure out who is the right connective tissue to start that with. So I think that this is an ideal opportunity for me to be able to get that information and get it to you, so that maybe you can get a NAVFAC brief on how they look at climate impacts to military installations, as well as that external component, which is what about outside the fence line? I think this is a great opportunity for me to do that, and I'll prep up what I can and get it to you.
And I have another question, which is, my understanding is the Biden administration did ask the federal agencies to put climate change strategy plans. And so I know that, each branch of the military does, have that. And my reading of some of those documents, and so I'm just kind of asking for some affirmation, is that troop readiness kind of seems to be the main focus of the military preparation with regards to that. And so we really look forward to understanding this. This is all new terminology to me, what you refer to as the beyond the fence line. And it would be interesting to know whether or not these climate change strategy plans for these different branches of the military include the adjacent communities.
Well, I assure you that they do. And I say this with a fairly high level of confidence, because if you look at, for example, the Navy plan and others, it talks about specific efforts. And this is the global Navy plan or the global Army plan. So they talk about specific efforts outside the fence line, in different communities around the world, in which this is a line of effort for the Department of Defense and each of the services to make very sure that they do this. And I think that connecting locally here with the different key players at each of the services would be able to provide sort of local examples of that, and if not examples, at a minimum, opportunities to pursue that.
Okay, I have some more questions, but I want to pass it on. So we'll go to Commissioner Otsuka.
Hi, Joe. It's nice to meet you. I'm Kiana Otsuka. Rosie, you kind of covered my primary question. I was trying to understand like what our role is on Oahu. And I think more broadly, and Joe, I think this is maybe a question for the colleague that you identify, but what are the opportunities for us as in commission, but also as City and County of Honolulu to sort of partner on efforts to mitigate and make us more resilient to climate change? And are there any resources that we should be aware of? I'm thinking like funding or technical support that we can also take advantage of. So maybe a question for your colleague. And then Joe, I also just, and maybe more for the commission again, and for your colleague that you refer us to. I think it's really interesting the state quantifies military aviation and military ground transportation emissions separately than sort of the civilian emissions. So that's in our Department of Health greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And my full-time role outside of the commission is I work at our metropolitan planning organization for the island of Oahu. And one of our big tasks is our travel demand forecasting model. So we're looking at things like population, as well as projected population and number of cars and all these things to think about what our travel is going to look like in the future. And that helps to sort of plan the transportation system for the island of Oahu moving forward. And one of the big pukas, one of the big gaps in our work is understanding how both civilian and non-civilian folks transport themselves to and from military bases. And I've been struggling a little bit to get like data and to get the right contact, and been working on this for like maybe the last 7 years and not very effectively. So would also love to talk to you and your colleague and figure out how we can work together to sort of figure that out, obviously in a information sensitive way, so that we can support folks getting to work in more climate friendly ways. So I think you know this, Joe, but like one of our biggest single source emissions is transportation. So we're really trying to focus on addressing that and sort of playing our role in supporting you folks and you folks supporting us in terms of funding, technical support, things of that nature. So I think it'd be really interesting to talk to, again, sorry, Joe, one of your colleagues maybe who works more specifically on Oahu issues. So I just want to share that for you and the commission and the public. Thank you, Rosie.
So if I can add one thing, and I want to point out there's a Indo-Pacific Command recently sort of started up or I want to say started up is probably not the right word, but expanded. It's what it's effectively referred to as its Hawaii office. And there's an entire staff now dedicated to the interaction between Indo-Pacific Command and the state of Hawaii and all the islands, you know, and city and local governments and the rest of that. I think that may be a great venue to track some of those requests, right? Say, hey, we haven't been able to get this in the past, and certainly I can connect those dots as well, because that's really what they want to be able to do. They want to be open, transparent. They want to provide the data if it's available. I mean, I will tell you is that getting emissions data, for example, for U.S. military installations is super hard, and it's super hard. Has always been super hard. When I was a logistics officer in 2006 and they were asking me these questions, I was like, I have no means of knowing how to do that, but that doesn't mean it's not important. Just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not important. So I think that having a better understanding of the questions and the data requests and now having a conduit into Indo-Pacific Command specifically because it really wants to be engaged with the city, county, community, you know, the state in general, I think is a great chance. So if you have those old emails and requests, I will encourage you to forward them to me or to them as I provide the data. So.
Thanks, Joe. Vice Chair Keener.
Thanks, Joe. And I know I've seen a couple versions of that presentation before, and you always add a little more, and it's interesting. So thank you for coming here today. And so, you know, I think your office and what we're kind of all getting at is a really nice example. The Climate Change Impacts Program. It's a really nice example of a program that looks at climate impacts and DoD response in a holistic way. You know, no matter where the region is, what you're doing is like linking dots and looking at impacts, looking at, you know, the climate variables and technical data, and then linking it to impacts, and then working with communities on the ground, and like that holistic chain of impact and engagement is, you know, a really nice example of a program in DoD that's looking at climate. And so I guess, you know, like I'm wondering, and maybe this is for Hawaii, it's this Hawaii office that you're referring to. Is there an analogous like DoD or Indo-PACOM program that looks at climate impacts in Hawaii or in country holistically and like kind of circularly like you were doing? So, you know, not just the impacts on troop readiness, but also the impacts on the communities and looking at adaptation. So some sort of analogous office to your program looking internally.
I will certainly, you know, do the research out there, Victoria, to see. And I say, I'll give you the best example that I can give you is I asked the Army Corps of Engineers and the Navy, for example, I said, do you do climate change projects, right? And they both said, no, we don't, right? What we do is we incorporate the impacts of climate change into every project, right? So if there is an issue that needs to be addressed from a security perspective, everything that they do takes that into account, right? Will they do a specific project, you know, and pick a name? I don't really care, and say this is a climate project. No, this is an important project that understands the climate implications. So finding somebody who exclusively looks at that, I think that there's a much larger organism here that is looking at across the spectrum of things, similar to what we do. But again, I'll make the best connections that I can, because part of it is finding specific questions to address, right? Or specific partnerships to establish. And I think I have an opportunity to help do that with this particular group.
Thank you. Commissioner Islam.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Joe. My name is Melanie. I work as an architect primarily, in addition to kind of the volunteer work I do with the commission. So I look at things really kind of from the build perspective, really from an implementation, mitigation, adaptation standpoint. So I like the thread of this conversation, you know, and I think my colleagues have sort of echoed, we want to really look inward onto Oahu. So kind of some immediate thoughts I have is, you know, there is, you know, our firm works a lot in federal projects, so we understand that there is actually some flexibility that can be gained on isolated jobs, right? Depending on how that RFP is crafted and whatnot. Some immediate thoughts I have is, you know, taking the guidance that perhaps comes out of the commission or the things that we at the public scale are looking at in terms of code advancement and using the projects that the federal government executes in Honolulu or Oahu as sort of a test pilot could be a good way of testing out to see if these strategies are particularly implementable or what are some of the challenges with that, right? And then in parallel with that, I know the Indo-Pacific looks at the broader kind of region, but a lot of the locations like Bangladesh, Thailand, what have you, they have similar sort of risks that we have. You know, I think there's some flexibility that you may have in those particular countries to also then sort of test out concepts that could then be implemented on Oahu installations or for the broader sort of statewide region. But just sort of thinking about like by building upon sort of active communications and relationships that you have with your other sort of divisions, thinking about how we can kind of implement these strategies more quickly by using projects that are sort of like test subjects. So that's sort of my thought where I sort of lead to immediately. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of share that essentially with you. Don't know what opportunities there are, but just as an opportunity for you to think of.
Thanks, Melanie. Commissioner Romine.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe, for being here today. It's good to see you again, too. I think my question is similar to Melanie's comment in that, you know, we are at the phase, I think collectively, where we're looking for solutions. It seems like there's pretty broad acceptance, and I'm glad to see that from your standpoint and the military standpoint about the climate risks. So we're at the stage of looking for solutions, and you know, it's kind of zooming in on Marine Corps Base Hawaii as an example. I do see a lot of opportunity there for maybe increase, or I'd love to know if there, you know, what level of discussions going on the example of the runway you showed, how threatened that is with sea level rise. We face similar threats to Hawaii's commercial airport and in our harbor facilities as well. And a lot of this happens at the state level too, and we are supposed to zoom in on the city level, but there's a lot of opportunity, I think, there's a lot of technological innovation that happens in the military that gets developed into the civilian sector. And I'm wondering, do you see those channels open where as you develop construction projects, as you adapt the runway at Marine Corps Base Hawaii, just as one example, or the port facilities there, the innovation that might come out of that, to share that with the counterpoints here in the state of Hawaii and the city and county of Hawaii. Similar example might be with energy resilience and independence, microgrids, alternative fuels. And then I think, it can work the opposite way too. Especially I'm thinking the example of nature-based applications. There's a lot of wetlands and dune resources on the Marine Corps base, opportunities to share from the local community back to restoring those resources. Is your office involved in those kind of innovation, technology, and even nature-based kind of adaptation solutions, sharing with state and county counterparts? And do you have an example or two that you might share on those? There's a lot there. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Brad. I mean, at a minimum, sort of what you bring to light is the need to connect more closely with key organizations within the city and county, as well as the state of Hawaii. I'm going to give you a presumptive example. Again, I caveated this in the beginning with, I'm a retired Air Force logistics officer. I'm not a climate scientist, right? I understand the security implications based on my background, but I also know that right across the water from where I'm working, they're getting ready to do like a $2 billion, construction effort to build a dry dock for submarines, right? Well, I will be willing to bet all the money that I have that construction effort is going to take into account the effects of sea level rise in Pearl Harbor, right? Because it'd be crazy to build $2 billion worth of work for something that's not going to be available, with a meter of sea level rise. So how do we connect those efforts and maybe the lessons there to say, okay, well, and then in efforts in the Port of Hawaii or efforts in ports in different, islands, hey, here's some of the things that we're implementing as part of our construction project that could be of use to you. I don't have a clean answer, Brad, on how to share that immediately, but the need is just blindingly obvious that we need to do that. And even the discussions earlier about lessons learned and bringing lessons from places like Bangladesh or Bangkok or others back to Hawaii, or bringing efforts from Hawaii forward. I mean, all of that just makes a ridiculous amount of sense to me in opportunities for the U.S. government agencies, and I will say that broadly in the state of Hawaii, to work more closely with the state of Hawaii on adaptation issues, as well as mitigation issues. I'm not really in the mitigation business, but on adaptation issues specifically. Because there's no sense learning the same lesson twice. One person should learn it and share with others. But I think there's an opportunity. I don't have a quick solution other than I'm going to really reach into this Hawaii office hard, as well as the service components, and say, hey, there's a bunch of interested people out here that want to get more closely connected to the same level of interest people in the Department of Defense. Let's make this happen.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from the commissioners at this time? All right, I do have a couple more questions, but I will reserve it to see. I want to give the public opportunity to speak. Actually, before opening it up to the public, I wanted to ask Tyler Belko, who put in the comments. In addition to the RPI Installation Resilience Program, there's a Defense Community Infrastructure Pilot Program. Tyler, would you please come off of mute and provide us with more information on that?
Hi, Rosie. I just wanted to provide some more information. And so like Mr. Martin had insinuated, there's a few different orgs within DoD looking at this, both nationally and in the state of Hawaii. And so I think it all kind of boils down to, what we're doing here, opening these lines of communication and really emphasizing what can we do in order to, achieve goals on both sides. And so I think this is just a really great example of the pilot program, because that is the ultimate goal is, how can we do something such as energy resilience or water conservation, that really can benefit both sides of the installation and the public. And so, I know the big $1 million question is, how do we fund these projects? And so I think it'd be really great if some of the team could just take a look at the site, kind of get the wheels turning, so that when we do push forward on these conversations, you already have a little bit of a tool in your back pocket of like, hey, this pilot program exists. Let's research into the funds and, how can we get this going?
Great, thank you. And at this time, I would like to open it up to anyone else from the public who have questions for Mr. Martin with regard to the presentation, or other questions with regard to DoD climate kind of risks in Hawaii and the Pacific. Okay, I have questions. Oh, yes, Director Gonzer, please go.
More so a question for the commissioners, and thank you to Mr. Martin for the sharing and the broader perspective, both regional, global perspective. In support of what we might be able to do to think through potential invites to get more information, understanding where the commission might be trying to go with a potential guidance document. And these are maybe questions for clarification, because I've heard a couple of things, Chair. It's the direct impacts to the installations locally and what that means then for surrounding communities and this island as a whole. But then I also heard potentially the impacts as a result of activities, and what that then means for, to Commissioner Atsuka's point, emissions, and how those might have consequences for the installations and then the surrounding communities and the island as a whole. Because we could certainly think through, direct contacts with not just NAFEC region, right? They also look across the Pacific, but specifically NAFEC Hawaii, and get better direct connections with some of the facilities folks at the different installations, if that's an appropriate next step.
Thank you so much. That was kind of the direction I was going in, is that for the brief that we are looking at, our question very much is, what is the intersection of military activities on Oahu that pertain to climate risks and resilience? And of course, identifying things that, that the Department of Defense that, engage in that make Oahu more resilient. For example, NAR's Army planting native trees, reforestation and restoration, alternative energy and decarbonization. This was brought up by some of the other commissioners about energy and building efforts for civilian housing. These are areas that perhaps we can share information on. We don't know if there's a mechanism for doing that, but certainly that's what we might recommend, is to create a mechanism for exchanging and sharing. But then also understanding the things that make Oahu less resilient. Certainly today is World Water Day, and we're going to bring up the fact that we are dealing with a military caused issue of our sole source groundwater. Also coastal beaches impacts, military exercises, coastal waters, pollution, particularly in Pu'uloa, what is now known as Pearl Harbor. And of course, I'm very interested in how the occupation of these lands makes access and movements of Hawaii residents difficult, particularly in the Waianae coast. So we're very interested in understanding how can we work with the Department of Defense to improve and help the lives of the people who live on Oahu, including civilians who are associated with the military. And then thanks to, I'm just taking extensive notes here, thanks to what Commissioner Otsuka brought up, is the gaps. That's also a thing that we're looking for, is that in a lot of the briefs that we put out, there is a big gap of information with regards to emissions, with regards to many other parameters and factors. And so we are looking to be able to shore up our numbers so that we can have the best models and policies to protect the people of Oahu. And so I really appreciate the example that Commissioner Otsuka brought up as a gap, and I'm sure that there are more. And that's what we're looking to identify, because we have to, our job is to provide the information that will enable our government, our municipal government, to make the best decisions for the people of Oahu. All right, so any other testimony or questions or comments for Mr. Martin at this time? Okay, so if not, we will go on to the next agenda item. And I have so many windows open that I can't find my agenda. So if I am looking at it right now. Okay, got it, found it. Our next agenda item, and thank you, Mr. Martin, for coming and presenting, as well as others who have come and provided additional support information, is a discussion on the next tentative meeting dates, April 26th, May 26th, and June 28th. I had requested for OCCSR staff, Karan, to ask if it would be possible to shift our meeting. We normally have it on the third or fourth Fridays from 9 to 11. And I was wondering if next month we could still have it on the same date, but shift it to the afternoon, say 1 to 3 p.m. Does that work for commissioners? Okay, perfect. Let's log that
Rosie,
in.
I'll be on the East Coast, so I might be able to attend and I might not, depending on what's going on with family.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll note that. And I think we should still have quorum, given that the other commissioners are available. So please tentatively hold that, and I'll have Karan send out a date on that. And then just wanting to confirm that we're also looking at May 26th and June 28th. I'm not scheduling beyond that, for simply because of the reason that that is going to Commissioner Keener and I are stepping off of the commission at the end of June. Hopefully, getting new people on. We're happy to stay until Mayor finds new people, but that is the last date that we will be officially here. Commissioner Romine.
If I'm looking at the calendar right, May 26th is the Sunday of Memorial Day weekend, I believe. So
Okay. Sorry, I apologize. I might have given you the wrong date on that. Let's take a look. See, we are looking at May 24th. Thank you.
24th.
May 24th. Yes, that's correct. So May 24th and June 28th. Okay, thanks. Thanks, folks. Okay, so that looks good and short is up. Agenda item 7 is communications and correspondence from the public. I was informed this morning that we do not have any, so we will proceed expeditiously to number 8, public input for matters not on the agenda. And we welcome any comments or testimony from the public. Maya indicated to me that Andy, who is present, will be speaking on agenda item 8 from the in-person meeting room. So I'd like to invite Andy to please present. Please identify yourself by your first and last name so that we can enter you into the public record.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Hello. Yeah, my name's Andy Bates. I'm from the Christchurch Uniting, and I'm the guy who's working hard to catch up and try and put together a resiliency hub on the windward side, a small one. And my question, and actually it's I've been trying to find someone who will give me an estimate for hardening some of the buildings. Now, I know that it's not going to be hurricane proof up to level 5 hurricanes, which I understand is the direction the state is going. But we are out of the disaster zone. We fit all of the resiliency hub requirements in your document that you've recently put out. And we're very excited about becoming one of those groups. So we've talked about hardening the facility, but I'd like to, if I could, find somebody, an engineer, an architect, somebody from your office who would come to the church and tell us which parts we should harden and which parts we can just let be as they are. Since again, we are out of the actual disaster zone by about 1/4 of a mile. We're the first church down from Castle Hospital. And if anybody has any ideas, I'm all ears.
I'd like to ask Director Gonzer to reply.
Sure. And thank you, Andy, for coming over for the in-person participation here in town in Honolulu as part of the hybrid meeting. Just for clarification for the commissioners, most of those questions were not directed at the commission. And Andy, just for clarification, the commission and the commissioners are independent volunteers. They're not members of the city team and the city office, which is the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability and Resiliency. Glad to hear from you again. We've been excited that you've been able to connect with 2 of our team members around your explorations for best serving your community and the congregation over there in Kailua. And we were happy to provide that letter of support for your efforts. I'd be happy to talk offline about the inquiries that you have, but a very brief response is we don't have the technical staff. You know, we don't have engineers and architects, but we can talk through a little bit more about how you may be able to get some additional support for the explorations and the assessments that you're currently exploring. So best probably, as you know, you're connected with Sarah Harris. That would be a great point to reconnect with as we explore this further. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public input for matters not on the agenda? Please feel free to raise your Zoom hand or write in the chat so that I can recognize you. Okay, moving right along to announcements. And I'll ask Vice Chair Keener to start by re-upping and re-advertising Climate Week, as well as any other commissioners if you have any announcements.
Thanks, Rosie. I see I put in the short link and Kiana put in the long description in the chat. So thanks for that, Kiana. And again, this is just a encouragement for everybody to both register for Climate Week events at this link and send out the link to your networks of people who may be interested in registering. This is open to the public. This is a chance for you to engage with authors of the National Climate Assessment around what your community is already doing for climate adaptation and climate action, where you see gaps, and then transition into how that can be reflected at the state level in the afternoon. There's also some great science the following day, both from the PICAST, the Climate Science Adaptation Center, and the USDA Climate Hub in the afternoon, an agroforestry seminar. So check all those out, and a lot of great events, movies, other types of things going on. So check out the website and please do register. And their t-shirts. Oh yeah, they're free t-shirts, and everyone should come and get free t-shirts.
Thank you so much. Any other announcements? Commissioner Otsuka.
2 things from me. I just wanted to plug, it might be of interest to the commission, Rosie, if we maybe get a presentation on the comprehensive climate action plan. So that's one of the big items for the afternoon of Wednesday, the 27th at the climate conference. So we're potentially getting a large sum of money to do climate mitigation efforts. I'm only really familiar with the transportation piece because I kind of help with that, but I'd love to hear more and or provide opportunity for the commission to discuss as a group in terms of how we want to be involved if at all, or how we might be able to support in the implementation of of that plan. And then second, my monthly reminder that there is a state electric bike, electric moped rebate available at the moment. To qualify, you have to, one, either qualify for a low-income program like SNAP, two, not own a registered vehicle, or three, you are enrolled in university or college, and that will get you 20% off, up to $500 off your electric bike or electric moped. And I can plug the link to the program and application in the chat. Thank you.
Mahalo. And as Matt mentioned, there's KaloFest at the Key Project in Kahalu'u tomorrow. I believe that Risa will be there, past Pacific Risa. Vicky can talk about it more. And there's also the Prince Kuhio Festival out in Waianae. I don't know if Matt, you want to say something, and then we can say that Vicky might want to talk about some of the activities that you can do. So Matt, what are you doing this weekend with OCCSR?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, two team members, one of our newest team members who just started at the start of this year, Whitney Dulé, or Poliahu Dulé, and Emily McKinney will be out at KaloFest tomorrow. Deputy Director Ben Sullivan will be out at the Prince Kuhio Festival in Nanakuli tomorrow as well, talking about, again, energy affordability and energy equity, particularly a grassroots effort called Solarize 808. And then the two team members at KaloFest will be sharing a lot of information, and there will be a lot of great resources if you're interested in different aspects that perhaps we're not even the lead on. We wanted to make sure to come with links and QR codes for other people's important work, including rebates and credits and things that are afforded to people right now, but also some targeted discussion around us now getting into the update of our climate action plan. And then I forgot at the beginning to include the link to the flood survey, so I did just include that in the chat. Thank you in advance for everyone participating in this flood risk survey, which will help inform more work that we do on the subject moving forward. It's available now through April 1st at mizzolinaoahu.org/getfloodready.
Awesome. And so we encourage everybody to get out there. There's a lot of climate events happening across the island tomorrow and into next week. And in my registration for the climate conference, you can attend virtually or in person. So there's no reason why everybody can't show up to some part of it. If there are no other comments or testimony or announcements, we have reached the end of the agenda. And this meeting.
Sorry.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I forgot to ask during the previous agenda item about the meeting dates. I know we said we would try to do an in-person meeting, maybe for Earth Day or Earth Week, or in some combination with the Climate Change Office's events. So I wasn't sure if we had made any progress or any decisions on that.
Oh, we have not made any progress on that. I will work with OCCSR to see. Part of, I think, our reason for not being as proactive is because the mayor is doing his like 11-week town hall thing, and it could we didn't want to kind of overwhelm our communities with that, but certainly we will circle back with Director Gonzer on that. Thank you for bringing it up and reminding us. Okay, are there any other comments? All right, so I'm happy to say that this meeting is adjourned. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Chair.
Right. Thanks.
Thanks, Rosie. And thanks,
Thank
Joe,
you,
for being here.
everybody. Yeah, thank you, Joe.
Joe.